I just love it. I just love being in the kitchens. I love being around the people. And I love to cook, and that's in a nutshell. I know that sounds really simple, but that's what I love, and that's what I do.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Some venues are so large they require multiple food and beverage offerings to lure in all walks of life and create an environment that is all-encompassing. What does it take to run a large venue and keep the food offering exciting and dynamic? Kim Brennan is the executive chef of the State Buildings and Como, the Treasury in Perth, Western Australia. Kim, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on the show. You're leading the team of an incredible venue over there in the West. How are things at the moment?
Yeah, really good. We're having a cracker of a year, and it's busy, and we're just getting organised now for the last quarter and going into festive. But having 4 venues across the buildings, it keeps us super busy and on our toes. But that's how we like it. So all good.
Well, give us a sense of the scale. Like how many staff, and what does it take to run those 4 venues in that amazing building?
Yeah, well, we've got between the 4 kitchens and the 4 restaurants, there's all up back of house, there's about 100 staff. We've got 2 venues, post and petition, which are 7 days a week and 365 days a year, and breakfast through to dinner. And then we're super lucky. We've got David Thompson's offshoot Longshim down in the basement, which is 5 days a week. And then we've got on the roof, we've got our kind of signature restaurant, Wildflower, that's in a beautiful glass box on the roof that overlooks South Perth and the river, and that's 5 days a week as well. There's just always something going on and something happening, and I guess that's what's kept me here, and what I love about the building so much is that every day's different and there's new challenges, and the days go very quickly, put it that way. So
it is a stunning building and an incredible fit out. Tell us a little bit about the history of the building.
Yeah, well, the history of the building goes back to the early 1800s, and it was quite remarkable. It's been used as government, it's been used as post office, it's been used as a franking room, it's been used, there's some jail cells, which, you can still see remnants in the basement at the back of Longshim. It's I think for Perth, it's such an important building and all this history, and our owners were, they were lucky enough. He was lobbying the state government to, get into the buildings and redevelop them. But before we we opened in 2015 now, so it's literally been, 8 years to the day yesterday we opened. But it was about, he was lobbying the government, I think, for, the building was vacant for 20 years prior to that, and then it was in construction for about 3.5-4 years. And we're just super lucky. I've been lucky. I've travelled around the world, and but to be able to come home and be a part of a building like this, and I still love it. I've been here since day one, and I still love it. I still spend my if I have an evening off, I'm in the buildings, and it's just, I think it's such a unique space. It's open to the public. Anyone can come through. You can move between the venues. So to be able to have that, as a hospitality venture here in Perth, I think we're just so lucky, and I love to be a part of that. So.
Are there challenges, given that it is a historic building, with what you can do and how the building operates?
Yeah, absolutely. We just put in a petition kitchen. We just put in a whole new hotline, and I'd love to extend that hotline and put in a sort of a second hotline, but because of the dynamics of the buildings, we can't put in a range that needs to go up through, because we've got hotel rooms above us on one side. On the other side, we've got the pool and gym, and we've got a members club. So, yeah, you're a bit restricted in things like that. But apart from that, it's it works pretty well now. And yeah, we're 8 years into operation, so it's a pretty well-oiled machine now. So,
give us a sense of your role, sort of as executive chef over the sort of the whole food operations. What's the day-to-day like for you?
So my day to day is basically checking in with my head chefs every day, my four head chefs. And then I look after a lot of the functions and events, especially the big sort of postal hall weddings. We're lucky we've got this beautiful grand room called the Poster Hall, which kind of connects all the venues. And we do a lot of weddings. And yesterday we had a beautiful long lunch for Perth Festival for 100 people. And so it's functions, events. It's working with because we are part of that hotel dynamic. We are working, and we do have that support of sales, there's a whole finance team, there's a people and culture team, there's marketing, reservations. So it's dealing a lot with the different departments. And then on top of that, I still need to oversee all the F&B, for the hotel, for the Como side. So working with, food and beverage managers and the general manager and, talking to our guests and, so in a nutshell, that's pretty much my day and going into the evening as well.
There's some pretty incredible restaurants, like Wildflower and Longchin that you mentioned. But, how different is the food offering for the hotel, and is there a different approach with what you do for that compared to the other venues?
Yeah, well, I suppose what we've tried to do over the evolution of the buildings and the venues is really nail the different concepts and make sure they stand alone on their own. When we first opened the building, post restaurant, it was more like a European bistro, and we had tasting menus. And at one point, I had 26 chefs working in a tiny little kitchen, and I had more chefs than Wildflower. And it was a bit kind of it's not quite Wildflower. It's on the ground floor, but it's Como, so we want to do this fine dining kind of thing. And I suppose that kind of got a little bit lost, and we were then competing against Wildflower. And then our owners made the decision to sort of turn to an Italian restaurant for Post for the dining room that's attached to the Como, the hotel. And then so that's kind of had an evolution over the last 4.5 years. Very first sort of evolution was pretty soft and put on a few passes and things like that. But now, we've had evolution in the dining room. The dining room's been changed, and the formatting of the menus and the drinks list is now all Italian varieties. And so I suppose each venue now has its own distinct concept, and they don't sort of clash against each other. They're completely different. And then the whole idea is that if we lock the doors to the building and you're staying with us here, that over a period of 4 or 5 days, you can dine in. There's 4 restaurants, there's 6 bars. We've got an afternoon tea lounge. There's enough to keep you going for a couple of days and keep you interested and keep it exciting as well.
Wildflower and Longchin would be known to many of our listeners. Tell us a little bit about both of those venues and what's so special about them.
So Longchin is that's a David Thompson street food concept restaurant, and I suppose the whole thing behind David Thompson and his brand is that we still do, to this day, is we get about 70% of our ingredients for Longchin we get via Bangkok. So he has a factory in Bangkok that supports all his venues around the world, and I guess that's the point of difference between us and the Thai restaurant, sort of in the suburbs or down the corner. It's that quality, it's that attention to detail, and then we put that with all West Australian proteins and seafood and our fruit and veg, and it's a pretty unique offering, and it's on par. We'd like to think it's still on par with the street foods of Bangkok, and the chilies all is amped up, and the spices, and I guess that's the point of difference between us and another Thai restaurant. And then Wildflower, we follow the 6 seasons, the Aboriginal 6 seasons, and it's tasting menu only. Lunch we have a small a la carte offering, but it's become it's such a beautiful dining room. You walk in and you're on the roof, and it's a beautiful glass box that overlooks the Swan River. And it's just such an amazing dining room, and we've been very lucky. We've had some great head chefs over the years, and it's been super successful. and yeah, I guess the evolution of that is it's still ongoing as well. We've got plans next year for some whole new crockery sets. It's just a beautiful venue. It only uses West Australian proteins and fruit and veg. Everything's local. Everything's in WA, and we really want to showcase those to our guests and our guests from interstate and our guests from around the world. So.
I want to explore what you're doing in a bit more detail later on, but take us back to when you were young. Whereabouts did you grow up and what sort of role did food play?
Yeah, so I grew up in the southwest in a small town called Bunbury. And I sort of, I was kind of, high school, I was kind of an average student. I liked my sports. But then I had a little bit of an interest in cooking, and one of my mates got an apprenticeship very early on, and we used to hang out and we'd go fishing and then we'd cook up what we caught. And I think early on at home, and we're always around food and, mum and dad having dinner parties and things like that. And as I got older, I sort of, I volunteered more to help out in the kitchen to get me out of sort of other jobs outside. And I suppose I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was in high school at that sort of age, around 15. And I went and did home economics, and I was, I'm quite proud to say I was the first male student to win top student of home economics. And I just kind of found I did some work experience with some really good, sort of mentoring chefs back in the day. This is a long time ago now, but I just managed to, did some amazing work experience and kind of put me on the right track. And then, I left high school, and back then it was sort of you did your certificate, you had the opportunity to do it full time. So I did TAFE full time. I loved it. I seemed to do pretty well at it. And then I landed an apprenticeship. And that was 2001 when I started my apprenticeship. So,
in those early years, what were the really important venues and people that you worked with as you started to build your career?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me in the early years was Kate Lamont, and she's a bit of a she's an industry legend, and she's still someone that I absolutely love and respect and look up to. And she definitely, and her team and her head chef Nathan Lee, who I'm still friends with all this time later, and it was sort of that less is more approach. It was the seasonality. It was the simple food cooked well. There was no sort of mucking around on the plate, and it's more in fashion, and people still try to do it now these days. But she was doing it, all this time, years and years ago, and she's just a powerhouse, and I've just got so much respect. She works incredibly hard, but it was that first sort of, okay, like, here's beautiful tomatoes, let's just do a simple salad, or a beautiful tart tatin, or it was slow cooked lamb shoulders, and there was also pasta dishes back then. And I'd grown up in a household which was meat and 3 veg, and to have a homemade pasta dish in the restaurant and making gnocchi or a ravioli and these sorts of things, and it was just, for me, it was a real eye opener, and it was a real, like, oh wow, this is what food can be, and this was what food can taste like. And from there, I was just hooked. I just wanted to learn more. I wanted to become better and better cook. And it was definitely those early days with Kate that set me up on the path we're on today.
You spent a bit of time in London as well. Tell us about that period of time, and what was it like for you when you got there?
It was rough when I first got there. It was 2005, I think. I was there for 2 years, did the whole, I finished my apprenticeship here, and then I didn't think I just thought I was okay. I definitely didn't think I was anything more than that in the cooking world. But moving to London, and I did a couple of trials, and I ended up at this restaurant called the Notting Hill Brasserie, and it was I think a 3 or 4 rosette restaurant. It wasn't a Michelin star or anything, but I soon found out that I was a pretty average cook. And I feel like that was a lot of my training on, it was, we had kitchens just full of amazing cooks and super experienced chefs. And I'd literally been cooking, for 4 years in an apprenticeship. So it was a hard graft. It was, I never worked, those hours in my life. But at the same time, I loved it. It was just, it was a super hard and a super, strict learning curve, and you learn pretty quickly, like you had to. And I just worked really hard. I just stuck at it, and I loved it. And I really feel like that started to make me a proper cook. And, a couple years there, and, traveling and eating, and, I loved it. The only thing it was living in a council flat building with 3 bedrooms that were really 2 bedrooms, with a living room turned into a bedroom, and then people coming and going, and that whole situation was just, after a couple of years, that was just tiring. So the visa finished, and it was like, what do you do? Do you stay? Do you come home? And I actually decided to come home, and then I probably regretted it for the first 6 months, but it all sort of worked out in the end. But it was a great time in my life. I was a young cook, so I was just willing to take it all in and experience as much as I could and learn as much as I could.
What was it like for you when you came back to Australia?
When I came back to Perth. At that time, there wasn't a lot going on. We had none of these, big city hotels we have now. There was a place called the Richardson in West Perth, which was sort of winning all these awards. There was, there wasn't too many sort of places. I got a job at a wine bar, and it was good, but I wasn't satisfied, and I just wanted more, and I couldn't sort of land a job wherever I want. I thought with that sort of experience, I thought I'd be able to sort of have options, at least when I got back to Perth, and the options were super limited. So I was back in Perth for less than a year, and then I moved. I had family over east, so I moved to Sydney.
You spent some time in the kitchen of Bacchus with Justin North. Do you have any stories of what it was like working with him?
Yeah, heaps of stories. It was brutal. Like, it was. So what happened? I moved to Sydney with the premise of I wanted to work for Justin. I followed him. I think I think 2008 he'd won Chef of the Year, and Bacchus I think was number 8 in Australia, and I'd followed Justin from his old days at Bank, and I just loved that, and that style of food was similar to what we were doing in London, and I just I just knew that was where I wanted to be. But then so I moved to Sydney, and then I went and did a stage back then, do a trial, and walked into kitchens, and I spent the whole day there, and I came away from it, and I was just like, oh my God, it's out of control. Like, it was out of control. It was just an army of chefs, and they were just, like, I remember peeling scampi to order so the guy could do a beautiful scampi dish, and there was pigs hanging in the cool room that needed to be butchered for service, and it was just kind of. It was just like, I was like, "Wow, this is." I actually thought it was out of control. And then, long story short, I didn't take the job. I landed a job at Maryvale with the huge Maryvale company that it is, and I went and worked for them. And that was another. I still see that as a learning process. We opened the Ivy precinct and worked between all the restaurants in there, and then did that for about a year and a half, and then I was like, I still had that, itch that I wanted to work with Justin, and then I went back. I did another trial. It still wasn't much, it was still pretty much the same, but I was like, I just got to do it, and I did it, and I loved every second of it. I met some great people along the way in that journey there, and it was one of those kitchens, and it sorted out the people who really wanted to be there and who really wanted a career, and we pushed each other to work to work super hard, but to just be better cooks. It was like, I was employed as a commie chef, and then I wanted to be a CDP. So I worked as hard as I could. I learned the sections. I learned how things worked, and it was such a great learning experience. I think, we worked super hard, and but I loved it, and it was, I remember, at one point when I was on the garnish section, and it was just, there was so many elements of the dishes back then, and I think we had 7 purees we had to do. Then each dish had a vegetable element, then it had a garnish, and we were, that was the garnish section. Then the meat section, once a month, would go to a commercial kitchen, break down whole quarters of beef. We were butchering lambs, we were butchering pigs, just to learn that, and that craft of all that sort of side of cooking. The kitchens these days, it doesn't happen. But it was just a massive learning experience, and I ended up staying with Justin right till the end. We moved he was in Clarence Street, and then he moved to the Westfield, to Pitt Street Mall, and it was a stunning venue, and we had state-of-the-art kitchens, and he went to Japan, and the kitchen was full of glassware from Japan, and we had absolutely everything. Like, it was the dream. It was his dream, but we were a part of it. Unfortunately, I was there to the end. I still remember serving the very last dishes on the night, going through that whole process of administration and things. It's not pretty, and I think Justin took it pretty personal, and that was my first kind of, oh shit, this is a business as well. But yeah, it was interesting times, and I think it was sort of, if you put together sort of Kate Lamont, Justin North, and my time in the UK, and that's the 3 biggest influences on my becoming the cook that I am today. So I owe him a lot.
You spent a lot of time with Peter Curavita as well. How did that begin, and what did you guys do?
Yeah, so once Becasse sort of all finished up, I had some family. My sister was living in the States, so I just took off for a couple months. Actually, first I did some casual jobs around Sydney, and then I took off for a couple months, and I managed to travel for a couple months through America, and stay with my sister and some family, and do some travelling, and then a friend from Sydney was already in Fiji and working front of house for Peter at the hotel, and then I just got I think I got some messages while I was away overseas, and I had a phone call with Peter while I was in America, and then I came back to Sydney, and Sydney was, it was, again, it was those kind of living situations which just made it so difficult, like shared apartments, and I was just over that whole shared living and people coming, people going, and I thought, I was like, what the hell, just give it a go. I'd never been to Fiji before. I'd never really knew anything about Fiji. I'd never worked for a hotel before, and I'd never been head chef before. But I was just like, you know what, let's just give it a go. And then a week later, I literally, once I flew back to Sydney, I was in there for a week, 10 days, packed everything up, and then moved to Fiji. Peter was amazing. He was, the first couple of weeks and months, he was there a lot, and he was just kind of watching and seeing how I'd go. And I remember after about, I think 2 months, 6 weeks or 8 weeks, I got some feedback from Peter, and it actually wasn't very, I think nice is the wrong word, but it was a bit of like a stern letter, like, you need to do better. And it was like, you, as your first head chef role, every single plate of food that goes out of that kitchen is your responsibility. And it was actually a bit of a kick up the guts that was like, okay, I need to work harder. I need to work, and do better, and make this a great restaurant that it had all the bones to be. And once I sort of got that, kick up the butt, and I just applied myself. I worked really hard, and worked with the local Fijians, and it was, there wasn't very many expats at that time. It was all local staff and, local produce. We used to get some beef and lamb out of Australia, but then it was all, local seafood. And again, I just sort of applied myself and just worked really hard and tried to make it the best restaurant we could. And I had a lot of fun along the way. It's a beautiful part of the world. From surfing, fishing, snorkeling, boating. It's paradise. So definitely a beautiful part of the world. But a couple of years of doing that, and I was starting to get a bit of an itching to come home. So.
Ooh, before we get into that, tell us, is there any sort of ingredients or dishes from your time in Fiji that sort of really stand out that you can tell us about?
Yeah, I think that the fish for number one, they kind of, it goes through the different seasons, and there's there's the mahi-mahi season, then there's the Spanish mackerel season, and then, and then the villagers and the fishermen, there's so everything is either it's those two or it's snapper, and then you get all these different types of reef fish, and they all just used to call them snapper, which I thought was hilarious. They say, no, it's just snapper, but it was all, the fish was amazing. But I remember, when I first started playing around with dishes and ingredients, because of the weather, the chilies are unbelievable. The lemongrass, and I remember we made this dish with some prawns, and we grated fresh coconut. And because the Fijians in the villages, they grate the fresh coconut, they make the coconut cream, and they make it in their soups and sauces. So I remember the first time trying freshly grated coconut, and we just put some salt and lime juice on it, and I was like, oh my god, this is flavor explosion. And just dealing and working with those sort of flavors, and things like breadfruit, I'd never used before, and it was amazing. You were kind of, and you had to work with what you got. You'd get a little bit of proteins from overseas, but ideally you just wanted to work with what was local. And the fish is amazing to this day. It's some of the best fish. Fishermen would catch it and they'd literally bring it to the back of the restaurant. We've got photos where they're unloading tuna, like huge tunas and mahi-mahi off the beach. We're literally on the sand, and then 20 metres away is where our restaurant was, and we'd butcher them and break them all down and serve them straight away. So it was, it was pretty special.
Tell us about that time that you moved back home to Western Australia. Was it very different for you?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. I'd been away all up overseas and things. I've been away about 11 years. I moved back in sort of mid 2015. It was starting from scratch again. It was, I'd been away so long, I was basically starting again. So even though I was coming home to, be close to family and things, it still felt quite foreign, I suppose. I didn't really know much about the local, the food and beverage scene, and it was starting again. But just to be part of these buildings here, and part of the onboarding process. I've flown back a couple of times, and I'd met the owners and the general managers, and had a look around the buildings, and I was like, it was just timing, and everything just ticked the box to be able to come home and be a part of an opening and be a part of a project like this. I was like, it's too good. Like, it's such an opportunity, and that was 8 and a bit years ago now. So,
what does it take to run a venue that's so big and multifaceted like this?
I think organisation is just key, and you learn to, I think over the course of my career, you learn to deal with a lot of people in different situations and things like that. And it's, all our venues are different, and they're all individual, and we've got 4 very individual and very talented head chefs, and it's working with them and trying to, even though I don't feel like I'm that old, I still feel like I'm a young cook, but it's still sort of mentoring and putting everything I know into helping them to achieve what they want to achieve. And we just want to keep these venues evolving. We still want to keep them to be regarded as some of the best venues in Perth, and we just keep working with them, and we work really hard. But to be a part of this building, it's like I still love it. And yeah, it's dealing with those those 4 venues and the different chefs. So it keeps me busy.
How about from a creative and cooking perspective? Are you still involved in that to a degree with the restaurants?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that we sort of work is with the head chefs, and they've got the concept of the venues and the sort of the direction and the food, but they'll sort of we have our weekly meetings, and then we'll go through what we're working on and it's upcoming, and menu changes and seasonal changes, and then they'll go away and work on dishes, and then we'll taste them together and present them together, and we'll work on them together, and then once we're happy with them, then we'll put them on the menu. I'm lucky that I've got Welly in the basement, Long Chim. He worked for David Thompson in Melbourne before, so he knows that brand and that style of food. I've got to be honest, Thai food, I've learned a lot about since moving back here. Hello? Oh, sorry, thought you cut out. All good. And then it's just working with the head chefs in the venues, and working with them, and trying to get the best ingredients we can source, and then we test it, and then once we're happy with it, it goes on the menu. But it's still, I prefer to be in the kitchens rather than doing these spreadsheets and meetings and things. But that's part of the job now. It is what it is. So.
You've been there, as you say, from the beginning, and it's quite a few years now. Have you changed during this period of time?
For sure. I think I think I'm more you've got to just working with all the different departments and all the different people, and I think something that someone once said to me early on in my career is you've got to take bits of everything, and sometimes you've got to take a step back as a cook as well and see it from the other side, see it from a guest point of view. And so I think feedback's really important. Feedback from venue managers is super important. Feedback, from our hotel side and working with our guests and, our front of house managers. So I think I've learned to sort of, take feedback on from all these sort of different people and just try and run with that and work with that and just make the venues and the food as best we can. But I think, you've got to be open to sort of that feedback, and if it was a bit like, no, we're just going to do it my way, then I just don't think it would really work. We want to empower the head chefs to have some creativity and put their stamp on it as well. And but I think that's the biggest learning curve is learning to take feedback on from a wide range of people and not take things too preciously. And then I think that's definitely been the biggest learning curve over the last couple of years for sure.
Well, you're a huge part of an incredible offering over there in WA. What do you love about what you do?
I think it's the people. It's the people and it's the product. I just love it. I come in the morning, I go get a coffee, and then my first thing is I walk through the kitchens. I want to be amongst the chefs. I want to talk to them. I want to see what's going on for the day. What are we working on? It's just what's next. But I just love it. I just love being in the kitchens. I love being around the people. I love to cook, and that's in a nutshell. I know that sounds really simple, but that's what I love, and that's what I do.
Well, Kim, it's amazing to get you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear just a part of your story. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.